My name is Cassandra Blake. The phone buzzed, but I ignored it at first. Another one of Dad's calls. I had a habit of letting them go to voicemail these days, an instinct more than anything. I had a feeling it wasn't going to be a warm, "How's everything?" this time. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the coldness of his voice. "You're out of the family business. We're moving in a different direction." No explanation, not even a hint of regret. Just finality. My heart stopped for a beat, but the sting didn't hit me immediately. I wasn't shocked. Disappointed? Yes. But not shocked. That was my life with him. Always second best. Always the one working in the shadows, doing the heavy lifting, while Dylan, my stepbrother, got the spotlight. I was the backup plan. The one who kept the wheels turning when everyone else took credit for the success. And in that moment, I felt it. Not just the sting of rejection, but the slow burn of something deeper. I had spent years giving everything. To the family business, I sacrificed my own dreams, my time, my life, and all for what? To be tossed aside with one simple voicemail. I didn't reply right away. My hands shook as I stared at the screen, trying to calm the storm rising in me. I looked at the message again, trying to make sense of it. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply typed out one word. Understood. I'd been given nothing but the coldest of betrayals. Fine. Let's see how they'd fare without me. I had always been the one behind the scenes. The one cleaning up the messes, smoothing out the cracks no one else wanted to fix. But while they were out in front, shaking hands, wearing the smiles that looked like victory, I was the one building the empire. They just didn't know it. Could feel the weight of everything in my chest, the late nights, the endless meetings, the sacrifices of who I could have been for the sake of what they wanted me to be. Dylan partied his way through business deals, laughing it off while I stayed up, poring over numbers, watching the world I helped create grow, always in the background, always invisible. I had built this company, but I was never seen as the heart of it. Then one day I realized I wasn't just the worker bee. I wasn't just the backup plan. I'd always been more. A small part of me had known it, deep down. The patents, the filings, the investments. It was all mine. No one knew but me. I wasn't just a cog in their machine. I was the engine. I'd kept everything under wraps, made sure to cover my tracks. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had been quietly, secretly, claiming what was mine all along. So when the voicemail came, when I was dismissed like an afterthought, I didn't panic. I didn't even feel that rush of anger. Instead, I felt a cold clarity. I wasn't just part of the family business anymore. I was the business. It's strange how a single moment can shift everything. A voicemail. A betrayal. It should have been a blow, but instead it felt like the beginning of something. Something I should have done long ago. The phone call ended, and for the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in disappointment. I wasn't begging for answers. Instead, I felt the stirring of something deeper, a need to reclaim what was mine, a sense of quiet power that had always been there, just waiting. I didn't have to scream or argue. I didn't have to raise my voice or plead. No. My plan was already in motion, even before I knew it. It had always been there, tucked away, buried beneath the weight of years of being ignored. I picked up my phone again, scrolled through the emails, the hidden records, the legal paperwork. I'd been setting things up for this moment in silence, ensuring that I held the majority stake in Blake Enterprises long before I was pushed out. They thought they controlled everything, but they didn't. Not anymore. The next step was simple. Just a few legal filings, a flick of the wrist on a keyboard, and suddenly, 51% of the company that they thought was theirs was in my hands. My father, my brother, none of them would ever see it coming. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval or their feigned affection. What I had built was real, and now I was taking it back. I wasn't just their employee. I was the one in control. And soon, they'd learn that. The boardroom was exactly what I expected. Polished wood, cold marble floors, the scent of power in the air. My father, his face a mask of calculated indifference, stood at the head of the table. Dylan, leaning back in his chair with that smug, entitled smirk, barely glanced at me as I walked in. They expected a show. They expected me to beg, to grovel, to fall into the same role I'd played my entire life. They didn't know what was coming. I didn't even sit down. I stood there, taking in the room, letting the tension settle. They were about to realize just how wrong they were about me. The door opened behind me, and my lawyer, Marcus, stepped in. Tall, confident, and always impeccably dressed, he was the kind of person who commanded attention the moment he walked into a room. He didn't look at my father or Dylan. Instead, he handed over a document, thick, official, and undeniably real. "Ms. Blake is here to reclaim what's hers," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying weight. The room froze. My father's face drained of color, the usual composure crumbling. Dylan's smirk faltered as he glanced between the lawyer and me, trying to make sense of what was happening. The silence was deafening. Marcus didn't need to say more. He didn't need to explain that I was now the majority shareholder. The papers in his hands said it all. It was no longer just about a family business. It was my business now. I didn't have to say a word. The legal filing, the sudden shift of power, it spoke for itself. I was done being invisible. They were about to learn what happens when you push the wrong person too far. I had spent years playing the part of the dutiful daughter, the invisible worker behind the scenes. They never saw me. Not really. I was always in the shadows, always the one fixing things, holding the threads together while my father and Dylan reaped the rewards. I had accepted that role for far too long, convinced that the love and loyalty I gave would one day be enough. But that loyalty? It meant nothing to them. The boardroom had become a battleground. My father's rage, Dylan's disbelief, and my quiet certainty that it was time to take back what was mine. Marcus handed the paperwork to the board members one by one, each document a stake in my claim. I didn't need to explain. The patents, the IP filings, the shares, all of it was tied to me. And when my father's eyes shifted from the documents to me, there was a moment of pure realization. He stammered, his voice cracking. "You've been behind this all along?" I could see the truth dawning on him. The rage, the guilt, the realization that he had underestimated me, dismissed me. His eyes flickered to Dylan, and for the first time, I saw a hint of fear in my brother's eyes. Dylan, who had always been the golden child, the one whose mistakes were swept under the rug, now felt the weight of the world crashing down on him. He tried to salvage the situation, but it was too late. "I've been building this empire, Dad. It was never just yours," I said quietly, my voice carrying across the room. In that moment, they couldn't ignore me. I wasn't just an employee, a pawn, or a backup plan. I was the architect of their empire, and now I was the one who owned it all. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension. Every pair of eyes was on me, waiting for the next move. My father's gaze was filled with disbelief, a deep anger simmering beneath the surface. Dylan was trying to hide it, but I could see the unease creeping into his stance. This wasn't how he envisioned things. This wasn't how he thought it would end, but it was over. And I wasn't backing down. I had always been the quiet one. the one who never raised my voice, never made waves. I had spent years keeping my head down, doing the work, quietly resenting the way they took credit for it. Now, the moment had come to rewrite the narrative. I watched my father, whose every move had always been about maintaining control, desperately try to regain some semblance of power. His words faltered as he tried to twist the situation in his favor. "You can't do this," he spat, voice shaking. "You're not built for this. You'll ruin everything." I didn't flinch. "I'm already doing it, Dad. I'm not here to ruin anything. I'm here to fix it." And then I turned my attention to the board members, silent witnesses to this family war, unsure of what to do. They were used to my father's commands. They were used to Dylan's reckless confidence. But now they were looking at me, the one who had always been in the background. And suddenly, I was the one they had to follow. Today, we make decisions for the future. And it doesn't include old ways. It includes innovation. It includes progress. I said firmly, watching as they slowly nodded, some of them hesitating, others leaning in. This was my empire now. I had their attention, and I wasn't going to let go. The power play was just the beginning. Now came the real work, taking control and reshaping everything. I didn't waste time. I had no patience for sentiment or nostalgia. The company had been built on outdated methods, on a crumbling foundation that had been held up by blind loyalty and an unwillingness to evolve. It was time to tear down the old and rebuild. I started with the people, the ones who had sworn loyalty to my father, who had kissed Dylan's ass, who had all too eagerly taken advantage of my quiet role. One by one, I called them into my office. Some left willingly, others were forced out. There were no goodbyes, no empty pleasantries. Just the cold, hard truth. They were no longer needed. I wasn't here to coddle anyone. I was here to fix what had been broken for years. Dylan, of course, didn't take this well. He tried to fight every change I made, going behind my back to talk to old contacts, trying to rally support from those loyal to Dad's old ways. But I was one step ahead of him. Every time he thought he had a chance, I shut him down. He couldn't outsmart me this time. "Don't you dare think you've won," he snapped at me one day, his words sharp, laced with venom. You'll see. You'll see how far you fall without us." I smiled, but it wasn't out of kindness. It was because I knew something he didn't. "Without you," I replied coolly, "I'm not the one who's going to fall. You'll be the one left scrambling for control. I'm not just running this company. I'm changing it. And you'll have no place in that future." The tension between us was electric, crackling with the intensity of everything that had been unspoken for years. We were no longer family. We were enemies. And in the end, I knew I'd win. Because this wasn't just about business. It was personal. I thought I could handle it. I thought the business side of things would be the hardest part, that the weight of the empire would fall on my shoulders, and the rest would fade into the background. But the truth is, running a company is easy compared to running your own heart, and that's what broke me, the personal cost. Every decision I made, every firing, every restructuring, felt like another piece of me was being chipped away. I had spent so many years hiding behind the numbers, behind the work, that I never let myself feel the cost of what I was sacrificing. But now, I couldn't ignore it. There were nights when I couldn't sleep. My mind raced through the decisions I'd made, the choices I'd forced myself to make. Firing people I had once worked with, cutting ties with old friends, people who had been loyal to my father and had no idea what I was really doing behind the scenes. But that was the hardest part. I was taking everything apart, piece by piece, and I wasn't sure anymore if I was rebuilding the company or just breaking apart everything I had ever known. And then there was my father. He kept calling, kept trying to reach out. His voice on the other end of the line was desperate, pleading in a way I hadn't heard in years. "You're making a mistake, Cass," he'd say. "We're family. You don't need to do this." But that was the thing, wasn't it? He never saw me. Not as I was. Not for what I could be. I wasn't a mistake. I was the one who had carried them all this time. But hearing the desperation in his voice, it shook something inside of me. I wanted to forgive him, but I couldn't. Not anymore. This was bigger than family. It was about me. Finally, I was living for myself. But damn, it hurt. The time had come. Everything had built to this point. A delicate balance between power and vulnerability, business and betrayal. But now, there was no going back. The corporate wars, the backstabbing, the endless reshuffling, it all led to this moment. A reckoning, not just for my father and Dylan, but for me. The tension between us had grown thick, the air charged with the weight of all the things unsaid. The final confrontation was inevitable. Dylan couldn't stay silent much longer, and neither could I. He had tried to undermine me at every turn, throwing tantrums behind closed doors, speaking ill of me to anyone who would listen. He had called me cold, ruthless, manipulative, words meant to tear me down. But in the end, they were just his excuses for losing control. I knew what was coming. He would come at me full force, try to undermine my authority, tell me I didn't belong in the place I had created. And he did. It was in the middle of another board meeting, my father sitting there with his face twisted in anger, Dylan standing beside him, smirking like the world was still his. But it wasn't. Not anymore. "You think you're the rightful heir?" Dylan's voice cut through the silence, his words dripping with spite. "You don't know anything about running a company. You're nothing without Dad. You're just I'm not nothing," I interrupted, my voice steady, calm. "I'm not you." And that was it. The tipping point. Dylan's face flushed with rage, but I didn't flinch. I was done letting him dictate my worth. I was done letting him, both of them, decide who I was. I've carried this company for years. While you two sat back and played games, I built something real. And now, I'm the one who decides what happens next. My father's eyes darkened, the weight of his regret settling over him like a storm cloud. But there was no sympathy left in me. It was too late for apologies, too late for redemption. This was my empire now. And I would do whatever it took to see it rise. When the dust settled, there was nothing left but the foundation I had built. No more remnants of what they had been, no more echoes of their control. Only me, and the future I had carved out from the rubble. The company was no longer a reflection of my father's outdated vision. It was mine, a living, breathing entity of my own making. The changes I had put in place were drastic, but necessary. New leadership, new projects, new directions. Every decision was a step away from the past, away from the family that had tried to define me. But it wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about me reclaiming everything I had ever given up. The years of quiet sacrifice, the dreams I buried for the sake of loyalty. No more. I was done being invisible, done being the afterthought. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be whispers in the halls. There would be old alliances trying to rally against me. But I had something. They didn't. Control. Not just of the business, but of my own life. And that power was stronger than anything they could throw at me. Dylan tried to make his last-ditch effort, talking to old partners, attempting to rally a revolt. But it was too late. I had already outsmarted him, outlasted him, and now, all he had left was a crumbling facade. He left. My father, too, eventually. They both faded from the boardroom, and with them, the last ties to the family business I had once served. It wasn't the end I had imagined as a child, dreaming of proving myself. But now, I saw it clearly for the first time. I didn't need their approval. I never did. The Blake Empire wasn't just a company anymore. It was mine.